Well, you got to have faith, the faith, the faith.
Oh, no.
Well, that's what we're talking about today.
Okay.
As he wraps up 1 John.
Okay. So he's Chris and I'm Jeff, and we're the Bible guys.
So today we're doing the Whisper Challenge.
Okay.
So I'm going to put on
Why
headphones.
are you so old? Remember that
Right.
from Gru?
From Gru. Oh, yeah. Yeah. By the way, I realized, I'm my neighborhood. There's a lot of rentals in my neighborhood. Like people, and they aren't taking care of their lawns as much. Whenever you have a rental, it's just that way, right? Mm-hmm. And
Sometimes.
Sometimes,
sure.
In my experience, most of the time. Mm-hmm. But I'm angry about it, right? So I'm out there manicuring my lawn, and I'm like, look at this, look at these guys, man. I'm like, can't they spend $30 on granules? And my wife goes, you've become the old man in the neighborhood.
Man. That's right.
And I am.
Do you yell at kids, get off your lawn?
No, I do not. That's
not yet.
That's one
it's
thing.
Coming. It's coming. Yep, that's right.
Here we go. Whisper challenge.
Okay. Here we go.
I'm putting. All right.
Okay, can you hear me?
No.
Why did you answer that? Okay. We are makers of history. Oh, I'm sorry. We are not makers of history. We are made by history.
Wow, I'm lost. Say it again.
We are not makers of history. We are made by history.
Okay. Did you read a paragraph? Is there chapter 2 on your
No, it's
sentence?
just 2 sentences.
Okay, I didn't hear anything. I'm sorry.
Really? You're not even going to try?
It started like you. Where was
we?
We. Yeah. That's it. That's all I caught.
We are not makers of history. We are made by history.
Wow, that's a
Martin
lot.
Luther King Jr.
I'm going to give you something easier.
Really?
That was crazy.
You didn't like that one? I thought that was a good one.
That was a lot.
I just read that the other day.
By the time your lips like moved like 5 times, I was done.
I just tell you, I was a little uncomfortable. I said, "Can you hear me?" And you said, "No."
Well, wait till you hear how loud this is.
Okay.
Ready?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Ready? The brick wall behind us is fake.
I have no idea.
The brick wall behind us is fake.
It looked like you said something like the big wall is totally free.
Oh, see?
Yeah.
See, I slowed my words down. I only gave you one sentence.
Right.
It's way more fun.
Right. Way more fun.
I said the brick wall behind us is fake.
Oh. That brick wall?
Yeah.
That's fake?
Yeah, it's a green screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's fun. So, that's good, right?
Well, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Dadgummit.
Wow. Uh-oh.
I just dropped my phone.
Is that a technical term?
Dadgummit. I think that that's how I'm old too. I made noises.
Dadgummit.
Well,
Get off my lawn.
Back to the lawn thing. Mm-hmm. I think I'm starting to realize more and more that I'm the old person in almost every setting that I go to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I really am.
You're starting to become the elder statesman.
Well, I went on a missions trip, and they're like, Chris, you're in charge of games.
Yeah.
I went to the Dominican Republic, and we were supposed to I had planned all sorts of like different kind of games, but it turns out everybody just wants to play soccer.
Oh, right.
That's it. So there was no use in doing anything else.
Right.
So it turned into all soccer all the time. And here I am with 2 bad knees on unlevel ground with roots, litter, trash, and bottles. I'm trying to hang playing soccer with kids. And I realized I remember the moments when I was a kid. I looked up and I'm like, look at the fat, sweaty old white guy, right? Like with the white hair, right? Like I just remember thinking, look, old person, right? Mm-hmm. And as I was doing that, I was thinking, oh my goodness, the memories I have of the old people, in those moments, like,
you're helping other people make those.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that of you because I mean, you're quite a bit older than me. And so even in this setting, you're the old guy, right?
What is it, like 6 weeks? Something like that?
I know, but it just maybe seems more.
It seems more. Oh, mercy.
But I want to have respect towards my elders, right?
That's right.
That's right.
That's a value. Don't you disrespect me again.
Okay, man, I'm sorry. So we are finishing up 1 John chapter 5 today, and it's 21 verses, but it's like 12 verses of content and then like 10 verses of, and so I'm closing now.
Right.
Conclusion. So
And my subtitle reads, Faith in the Son of God.
good. So here it goes. It says, everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has become a child of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves his children too. We know we love God's children if we love God and obey his commandments. Loving God means keeping his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. For every child of God defeats this evil world, and we achieve this victory through our faith. And who can win this battle against the world? Only those who believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And Jesus Christ was revealed as God's Son by his baptism in water, by shedding his blood on the cross, not by water only, but by water and blood. And the Spirit, who is truth, confirms it with this testimony. So we have these three witnesses, the Spirit, the water, and the blood, and all three agree. Since we believe human testimony, surely we can believe the greater testimony that comes from God. And God has testified about his Son. And all who believe in the Son of God know in their hearts that this testimony is true. Those who don't believe this are actually calling God a liar because they don't believe what God has testified about his Son. And this is what God has testified. He has given us eternal life, and this life is in his Son. Whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have God's Son does not have life. I've written this to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, that you may know you have eternal life. And we are confident that he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. And since we know he hears us when we make our requests, we also know that he will give us what we ask for. If you see a Christian brother or sister sinning in a way that does not lead to death, you should pray and God will give that person life. But there is a sin that leads to death, and I'm not saying you should pray for those who commit it. All wicked actions are sin, but not every sin leads to death. We know that God's children do not make a practice of sinning, for God's Son holds them securely, and the evil one cannot touch them. We know that we are children of God, and that the world around us is under the control of the evil one. And we know that the Son of God has come, and he has given us understanding so that we can know the true God. And now we live in fellowship with the true God, because we live in fellowship with his Son, Jesus Christ. He is the only true God, and he is eternal life. Dear children, keep away from anything that might take God's place in your hearts.
Yeah, there wasn't as many closing verses as I thought.
Yeah, that last piece is all just a summary of what he's been saying through the whole rest of the book.
For
right?
sure
He just pretty much summarized it.
And the drop the mic verse is, whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have God's Son does not have life.
Yeah.
Which is just pretty clear.
Yeah. Well, the King James says, he who has the Son has life, and he who has not the Son of God has not life. And so sometimes people ask, or say how complex the gospel is, but the gospel's so simple you can say it in one syllable words, right?
Yeah.
And here's whoever, but in the King James it's he who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son of God does not have life. That's it. One word or one syllable words. So very powerful phrase.
There's a note here in verses 6 through 8 when it talks about the baptism. He said, at this time there was a false teaching in circulation that Jesus was the Christ only between his baptism and his death. That is, he was merely human until he was baptized, at which time the Christ then descended upon him, but then later left him before his death on the cross. But if Jesus died only as a man, then he could not have taken upon himself the sins of the world, and Christianity would be an empty religion. So I think that was interesting. Remember, when he, as our listeners probably know the story of Jesus saying, baptize me. And John the Baptist said, no, I'm not worthy. And Jesus said, no, you must baptize me. And then the God, the Father spoke and said, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. And then the dove comes down, right, in the Spirit of God. And so the false teaching was he wasn't fully God before then, which, of course, this is saying is not true.
That's right.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, these three witnesses, it's really important because, and John seems to be wanting to be confirming this. So in the previous chapter we read, he said, I saw him, right? I was a witness, a physical witness. And then here he's saying God's Holy Spirit also testified that Jesus was the Messiah. His baptism testified that he was the Messiah. And then his shed blood testified that he was Messiah. Of course, Paul would add to that his resurrection, right? Would be the other one that was the
right.
proof that he was the Messiah.
Right.
So, yeah.
Verse number 3 says, loving God means keeping his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. That is a heck of a phrase, because so I've been in this gig as long as you have, right?
Yeah.
So, and I would say that you a little bit more than me pastoral title. So, because I got saved later on in life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, my point is this: is that over the 30 years plus that we've been pastors and have existed in the church, there's been no shortage of people who struggle to keep commandments, right? So, commandments feeling as if they're burdensome, right? To stay holy, to resist temptation, to not lust or think bad thoughts or be angry or hang on to unforgiveness, things like that. And people would say the commandments are burdensome. Gosh, I would say the majority of in-depth conversations that I've had with people who struggle to live a holy life would say, I'm obeying God's commandments, not necessarily because I desire to, but the opposite is true. My flesh desires to do the opposite, right?
Right.
And so I just do it because I have to. So anyway, I remember, and I think I've referenced this once before, a very long time ago, but I remember reading a book called Grace Walk, and it was somewhere in the mid '90s, and it talked about obeying God not because you have to, but obeying God because you want to, right? So there's a big difference between those two things. So if you view that God's commandments aren't beneficial for you, or if you view that you're obeying God because I guess that's the right thing to do, but if you're motivated purely out of love and gratitude, like I love God so much, and I believe fully that His commandments are beneficial for me, and I know that He has what's best for me. I remember reading this book, and it talked about how the order is know God, love God, serve God. It has to be in that order. Think about that, the depth of that, right?
Yeah.
If you're having trouble serving God, chances are you don't love Him enough.
Yeah.
Right? And the only reason why you don't love Him enough is you just don't know Him.
Right.
So to know God is to love God. The more you know Him, the more you love Him. And the more you love Him, the more you want to serve Him. So there's a difference between serving God because you feel like you have to, or serving God because you want to.
Right. Right.
Because you want to please your wife.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You want to do things for your wife.
And it's right to do it even when you don't want to do it.
Yes,
right?
but it's rooted in that love. So there's moments where you don't want to.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But you always want to.
I had a professor who asked us to define love. And, we're all in our 20s, and so we're all experts on love. And, some of us were engaged. I was married at that point. So I was 27 when I went back to college. And so I was, I think, the only married guy in the room. But even then, I couldn't wax eloquent on it either. I knew where he was trying to take us was going to be a dangerous trip because everybody's answering questions. He has a smile on his face. And then finally he said, listen, you guys are talking to me about the emotions and the feelings of love. But I'm asking you, what is real love? And he said, real love is a choice. It's always a choice. It's a choice. And I was like, wow. And then he talked about, as his wife had begun to fade mentally. She'd be angry at him, and she didn't know him anymore. And he just stood there with tears in his eyes. And he said, you know what? At the beginning, it was passion and excitement and all this kind of stuff. And he said, hormones drive that. The newness of discovering a person, the fact that there's attractiveness and all this stuff. But he said, ultimately, when you stand there and you make a vow to love this person for the rest of your life, he said, that's a choice that you made. And he said, I think oftentimes we enter into love very flippantly because of all the fun of it. And when the fun of it goes away, so does our quote unquote love. But he said, that's not what real love is. Right. So,
there's a passage that C.S. Lewis writes in Mere Christianity, his book, Mere Christianity, where he talks about that exact same thing. And he talks about being in love is different than, what was the phrase? It was like, being in love is different than the love that started it or something. I wish I could remember, but here's what's worth saying. What's worth saying is he talks about the intensity of first falling in love. And he said, who could bear to exist that way for all of your marriage, right? He said, with that sort of intensity of feelings, right?
Right.
He said, falling. Oh, it was falling in love. Falling in love versus being in love. That's what it is. And he said, falling in love was merely the explosion that grew into a deep, more mature love.
Yeah.
And he talked about the maturing love being more of a choice.
Yeah, that steady flame.
And because he said, falling in love is different than being in love. And I thought, man, that is an incredible distinction.
I think most of us live our lives thinking that the falling in love is love.
Right.
And it's not, right? So, there's a thought that is right on the edge of my thinking. So let me try to talk it a little bit. I used to like kung fu movies when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
And
hey, want to fight?
Yeah, exactly. or the Kung Fu Panda kind of thing, whatever.
Yeah.
And there was always a master.
Yeah.
Who would take somebody who had certain skill sets.
Yeah.
And go, you have potential.
Right.
But there's a whole other level. Right.
Right.
And so the master was always trying to take the student to this other level, and then they would discover you could fight on another plane where all of a sudden the world would slow down and you're just going so fast and all this stuff, you can dodge the bullets, kind of like in the Matrix or whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's this other level. And I really feel like when you read John in particular, John keeps telling us there's another level, right? There's a different way to live. And so what you were talking about, most of us obey God's rules kind of in a grudging way, and it feels burdensome sometimes, the majority of the time, or a lot of the time, or some of the time, especially when you don't want to honor God. But what he's saying is there's this other level that when I stop being me focused and I start being God focused and his holiness focused and the fact that he deserves my love and my sacrifice, that burden of trying to fight against that temptation, that burden of trying to obey God's commands stops being a burden. It becomes very light because now my motivation completely changed. That's that next level, that kung fu thing is it flips when it stops being about you. And so usually, that student, it's about the cold, it's about the hot, it's about getting hit or punched or whatever, and he's distracted by all those things. But when he can stop being distracted by those things, suddenly he's moving on a different plane, can beat everybody, right? And it's kind of what John is saying, I think, that sure, if you're just trying to obey rules, Paul told us the rules of the law are heavy, and we can't keep them. But then Jesus says, follow me because my burdens are light. He doesn't say it's not a burden, he just says it's a light burden. And then John says, when you're really motivated by love for God, it's not hard. And so I think he's inviting us to this next level of living, but it's living where I'm not the focus, he is.
Yeah. What's amazing about my mind is as you were explaining that, the first half of that, I thought of 6 movies where the Padawan had gone and trained under the master, right? And there's a whole new level of fighting, and they have potential. Star Wars being one of them.
Sure,
Kill Bill, which has a lot of killing in it, by the way. And then I was thinking of the Matrix, and I was thinking, you move like they do, and he says, well, apparently not fast enough. There is no spoon. All these things are going through my mind, and I'm like, Chris, set aside all these great scenes.
I was thinking of Bible verses, but whatever.
Whatever. Well, I mean,
no, I'm joking. I reference movies too.
Yeah, well, you did the comparison relation, or you related it to the parables.
Yeah.
Jesus did the same thing, by the way. Jesus always said, hey, let's walk through the garden. He's like, I'm the vine, you are the branches, right?
Yeah.
He talked about, crushing grapes and producing olives, and he talked about fig trees. He did that all the time. He did what you just did,
right?
And he says, hey, take this situation. I just said parables, but that's really what they are. Like
sure.
he's using the Matrix. We could use the Matrix as a parable.
Absolutely.
We really
storytelling, right? It's storytelling. You use the story. Jesus would say, hey, let me tell you who your neighbor is. So this guy's going down to Jericho, gets jumped by a bunch of robbers. Another guy comes, these people walk past. And he would tell a story to drive home a point. That's what storytelling is and movies are.
And by the way, let me do this quickly.
Go ahead.
Off the top of your head, just name 3 great box office movies that made a ton of money that you thought were great. Just 3. Could be
Three.
any.
Gladiator.
Gladiator,
I loved Titanic
Titanic, yep.
and Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones. Okay, those three. So, did you ever read John Eldridge's book when he talks about that there's a pattern of all movies?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So John Eldridge said, so John Eldridge says that every great movie follows the story of the gospel. And the reason why we love great stories like this is because it's the gospel in us.
Right.
And he says, and the story of the gospel is the story of every great plot, which is these sections. Movies introduced, everything's right in the world. Something tragic happens, oh no, there's an oh no. And then there's a battle that has to be fought or a journey that has to be taken. And then there's a hero that saves the day, that he sacrifices something, right? And so you named three movies that I had no idea what you were going to name. Gladiator, everything's right in the world. He's the general. Something tragic happens, the killing of Caesar, right? A battle that has to be fought, his whole gladiator journey. And at the end, he fights Caesar and gives his life like a martyr. It is the gospel, right? Titanic, everything's right in the world, right? They hit the iceberg. Oh no, there's a massive journey. And at the end, Jack saves Rose, gives her the floating door, and he dies. That's the gospel.
Apparently they couldn't share the door. But
Indiana Jones, right? Everything's right in the world. He's a professor. Something happens. What happens? Well, you have to go find, let's just pick the first one, the Ark, right? So then something tragic happens.
It gets stolen.
The Germans, the stealing, right? The journey has to be fought. And at the end, what does he do? He shows up, saves the day. The Ark gets put in a warehouse.
That's right.
So it's the same thing. And it's
that's in John Eldridge's book, Epic.
Epic, yes.
Yeah, that's the name of the book. It's a little tiny book.
Yeah, and I think that's worth saying. It's just not nonsense time wasting as we're talking about this, because again, we sort of brought and attached some parable thoughts here. But I'm thinking to myself, every human is the same, and all of us have the gospel built in us.
Art reflects the heart. And the heart of humanity is we know there's something more than just us.
Yes.
Right? And we're drawn to this epic story of the gospel. And so we keep trying to retell it.
And I would argue and say the reason why those are the movies that make $1 billion or more is because those box office movies have that plot. Those are the ones. Now there's other plots. They just don't make as much money.
Sure. Right.
But those make the most money because that's what every heart wants to see.
Right. It's great, man.
So anyway, that's probably a good place to end, and we'll see you next time on the Bible Guys.